I just started recording this video and I'm already like, let me actually grab my copy of Last of Us. But now I gotta dig it out of the back because I got it behind a ton of stuff. One moment, or maybe longer than one moment. Back. It took actually not as long as I thought it would initially take, but here's my PS3 copy of The Last of Us. So now I've got the original disc, the Blu-ray disc of PS3, and then I guess this was a time back then where the only thing you're getting is this little pamphlet, and this had an online pass to it so that I can play the online game on Last of Us. But really, that's it. A nice little picture of Joel on the box cover. Man, this is when games started to say, okay, you're not getting a book, this is all you're getting. But even back then, in the PS3 days, this looked incredible. And this was one of the last games available on the PS3 before we upgraded to PS4. And the output of this was just 720p and 480p. It's really incredible. And thankfully I still have my PS3, so I can play the PS3 version of this as well as the HD upscale PS4 version, and I play that on my PS5. Now in today's video, what I wanted to talk about was of course The Last of Us. Now episodes 1 and 2 have been released. By the time that this video comes out, you might have already seen episode 3, and I think that at least so far in the series, and again, I haven't seen episode 3, but if they're on this type of storytelling track, I'm pretty sure episode 3 will be good. Let me know in the comments down below if it was or it wasn't. But by the time I recorded this video, I don't know. But The Last of Us message, really, and what it's getting to people and to the movie industry is that you can use a video game license to tell a great story that not only transcends the video game industry, but it also starts to wrap a bigger audience around that franchise. And I think that The Last of Us property did it right. Now, if you guys have known my channel and been around for a while, I actually am a huge fan of the Shenmue series that was started way back in 1999 and released on the Sega Dreamcast before it had its third version released to PC and the PlayStation 4. And that series did have an anime that released on Crunchyroll around this time last year, which was a phenomenal series. However, the success of The Last of Us shows that material, especially when grabbed from a video game franchise, can be represented right and be very popular. Now, what did The Last of Us do that other franchises have gotten wrong when it comes to video game series? Now, first, one of the key features that I think that they mistake is that, now if you take a modern game, such as the Resident Evil series, or you take a modern game like even Metal Gear Solid, which does not even have a movie up to this point, but you're taking 30 to 40 hours of gameplay and many multiple hours of storyline, and you're trying to squeeze it into roughly a 2-hour movie. That is really the biggest struggle, because there's a lot that you end up skipping. And that's unfortunately one of the struggles that producers and directors have had trouble with when it comes to adapting video game storylines. So you gotta really lean on the writer to be able to condense it or write an original story that, of course, brings the audience in. But then there lies your other problem. Once you start to deviate from the source material and write an original story, you might alienate the fans of that franchise. But what choice do you have, because you have to make sure that this story is condensed, but also respects the lore of the original storyline, and that could be a very difficult challenge, which in many cases doesn't end up working out. And I will use the Resident Evil franchise as an example. The movies themselves differentiated so much from the original source material that it almost seemed like the Resident Evil movies became an entirely different franchise with just the Resident Evil name when compared to the video game series, and that in itself turned a lot of gamers off to that series. Now, I did enjoy the first 2 Resident Evils, but from then on it was like hit or miss. And then finally, when you have Hollywood touching these franchises that have a huge lore in the video game industry, one of the big problems is the directors or the writers, they do their research so that they know or can capture key things about the games, but they're not true fans. And they didn't have any involvement in the production of the video game. And that's something that The Last of Us gets right. Some of the original producers and even actors from The Last of Us video game came back for this series. and actually lent the hand when it comes to the development of this series. And that's something that is key to making sure that you get the franchise told in the correct way. Now, I spoke about the length of a movie not being able to tell a story. Now, when it comes to 90s franchises, it's kind of different because most franchises in video games in the 90s, especially when you just had 2D pixel animation, they might have had a deep story, but the story was not long, and it allowed for creative ways to express that on television that you couldn't do really when it came to the 2D sprite animation, even in today's standards. For example, Sonic the Hedgehog, a franchise that many of us know and are familiar with, you were able to adapt that not only into a cartoon series, but several different cartoon series, but be creative and take creative liberties, because when it came to the actual story elements of the video game series, it wasn't as deep. So you can get creative in the medium and still respect fans of the franchise. Another example is the original Mortal Kombat. Now, we're not talking about Mortal Kombat Annihilation or the remake of Mortal Kombat couple of years ago. I have my own comments about that, and you can check out that video. I'll leave the link right there. Long story short, that original Mortal Kombat movie did have a lot of lore, because Mortal Kombat in itself had its own lore when you played the game and through text. But you can take creative liberties too, because it's just a fighting game, and you can develop a story around it. And much of what the original movie's story developed actually leaked into different games, which only helped the medium. And now The Last of Us, in my opinion, is one of, if not the shining example of what a video game series can do when all the pieces are in place. Now, here's what worked out for The Last of Us. First, it was considered one of the best video game releases of all time. Second, you had enough time since the release of the original game to develop the storyline a little bit further, and also to continue to grow that fan base with the re-releases of the game as well, helping that. You had some of the people who worked on The Last of Us video game come back for this series. And you made it a series. You didn't try to condense the story into one 2-hour movie, which wouldn't have worked for The Last of Us. And then finally, and this is one of the most important things, and something that I wish the Shenmue series had, but they didn't, is primetime viewing on a major network. It's on HBO, and it's got that push. I've seen billboards and advertisements for The Last of Us everywhere. I was just in Times Square yesterday, and it was there. Big billboards advertising The Last of Us. The marketing push was there. The right network was there. The streaming service was there. Shenmue had Crunchyroll at midnight and Adult Swim at midnight, and I never saw really a poster outside or any type of deep advertising for that. And that's really the shame, because marketing is so important, but when you fill in all of those missing items, you have a goldmine of a franchise. And now The Last of Us, I'd be surprised if they didn't get a season 2 on HBO, because they definitely got the budget to make something incredible. And I think that other studios should actually learn from the lessons that we learned in the development of The Last of Us, that you can take a video game franchise and make it good, respect the source material. Heck, you don't even have to change the story that much, if at all, because you have the time to tell it, especially with modern day stories. Now, Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, as I said before, is successful in movies because the lore is simplified and you can expand upon it in different ways. When it comes to modern games, should definitely stay away from making movies if you want to tell an elaborate story that people will cling on to. That's part of the reason why I wish the Metal Gear Solid movie didn't quite happen and it became a series as good as The Last of Us, because if you tell it right, it would be an incredible action, adventure, drama, sci-fi thing. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think when it comes to video game franchises finally getting their due after so many years of near missteps, kinda good, and somewhat failures. I won't mention Dead or Alive. But, as always, you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later.